Okay, good afternoon. This is Ed Morales, and very excited to welcome you to a new edition of Next Level Advisor. We're particularly excited this afternoon to welcome Virginia Barausky. Virginia is our National Sales Director for Long-Term Care. And Virginia, welcome. Glad to have you today, and a most important and relevant topic that we hear specifically from financial advisors and institution alike. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Excited to have you. We know that this is long-term care. There's certainly a lot of questions, a lot of misunderstandings about long-term care, and we continue to hear about kind of the evolution of long-term care. So I just have really a couple of quick questions for you. My first question is can you speak to a little bit about what has been the kind of the evolution of long-term care? We know there's been a lot of changes the last decade. Can you give us an overview and for the audience to kind of understand what care is, coverage, and what it was and what it is today?
Sure, absolutely. And it definitely has changed in the last 10 to 15, even 20 years. Most people think of long-term care and they immediately think of a nursing home. They think it's a place. And it's not a place, definitely not today. What long-term care is really an event that renders you needing some kind of help. So physically, you'll need help with activities of daily living. And if you had some sort of extended healthcare event where you needed to bring somebody in to the home, let's say, that's one of the biggest changes, is that in the past, home healthcare didn't exist. And now it's the leading area for most people. If you think about long-term care planning, they would prefer to stay in their homes and remain independent and have someone come care for them in the comfort of their home. That's one of the changes. There's also more resources, a lot more resources for families out there. There's adult daycares for helping with memory care. There's assisted living facilities. There's independent living facilities. There's a lot more resources to address all the individual needs for long-term care than there ever were before. It used to just be nursing home. Now it's expanded to a large amount of different services available. One of the other plans that have changed is really resources for the family as far as funding goes. So funding can be a big obstacle for a lot of folks. And in the past, there was long-term care traditional insurance, and that was sort of like a car insurance or your homeowners. You simply paid a premium and you had good coverage. And those policies were great. They had lifetime, unlimited benefits sometimes, and you've seen a lot of challenges with those carriers having significant rate increases. What's happened today in the evolution of funding is that now there's a lot more options out there for clients. There's lots of different funding vehicles that are available, but the number one thing they wanted to address is some of the obstacles facing folks as far as rate increases. So now you have guaranteed rates that are built into these alternatives for long-term care policies.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I know you were mentioning funding and pricing. We've heard from a lot of consumers that specifically long-term care is too expensive or continue to escalate in essentially in their premiums. And if I'm hearing it correctly, that's no longer the case. It looks like there's other options. Is that correct?
Yes, there are other options. I won't tell you it's not expensive. So right. Long-term care services in general, they are expensive. It does depend if you're staying at home and you have a home health aide or a home health nurse. Depends if you have adult daycare. All the costs are different. One thing we do, and we do really well if you work with us, is simply go through it down to the zip code and find the actual cost per your plan of care or what you think you may want to be able to determine just how much care you might need and what the cost could be facing you. One thing that isn't disputed is who's going to need care. And that is 70% of folks out there today, if you're age 65, will need some kind of long-term care, whether it's in your home, whether it's temporary, you might have a fall and return back to work, or whether it's permanent. But to fund it, what we're finding now is that we do have a lot more choices for clients. We have these alternative policies that offer folks to have a rate lock. They can offer inflation. You can choose and pick and really customize your plan based on needing unlimited, whether you want unlimited for an Alzheimer's situation, whether you want 6 years of duration, 4 years of duration, how long your benefits will last. We have joint plans we've got individual plans, and all of them tend to have something that's going to allow for a death benefit if you never need it. Because the big question is, well, what if it doesn't happen to me? None of us want to need it. So they've got guarantees built in. All of these new policies that are out there, there's several different options, are going to have a little bit different take, but they're going to give you that peace of mind, a large bucket for income tax-free care. That's what you're really designing, is to take the pressure off the portfolio and the family.
It's relieving to hear, I think that, and again, I appreciate the clarity or clarification as relates to funding versus kind of, because long-term care in itself continues to escalate as far as the necessary healthcare or care that is necessary for an individual. That continues to grow exponentially, but it's also important to note, as you mentioned, that for clarification, that kind of the evolution of what this has been to protecting against some of the escalation and getting coverage and getting policies you refer to is of such that they even have guarantees. So you're not contending with escalating costs, but also an escalating policy. It seems like you can kind of get to a place here where there's better predictability, for me as a client or for someone that's actually looking at this type of planning. Did I get that correctly?
Did. There is definitely something that is predictable. These are now lifetime guaranteed. So you're finding that these are different types of policies than we've seen in the past. A couple companies have been out there longer than 20 years, but there's quite a few options out there for clients. And if you think you can't obtain one of these because of your health, I would suggest you still take a look, because you'll be surprised. There are different levels based on your health of different policies that are available. So I've even got something that's available for someone who maybe isn't in the best health. So don't discount yourself without having a conversation with someone who's a specialist who knows all the options that are available to you, because you could be surprised. There's quite a few options out there today.
Okay, Virginia, that is so helpful. I think as you talked about the evolution of what we've seen really over the last decade, and then kind of some of the alternatives and options that are available, I want to kind of really drill down here as we look at our audience, their financial advisors. And can you talk about what are some of the things that you're seeing in the marketplace with our advisors and at large about where there's maybe some reluctancy with long-term care, or kind of how does this fit into their overall planning? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Ed. With financial advisors, I will tell you, I'm not sure it's necessarily reluctancy, other than it's really out of sight, out of mind. It's just not what they do every day. Most advisors are busy managing portfolios, and long-term care is really something that's sort of an extra add-on or a side salad or item number 10 on the checklist. It's not a priority, because it's not something they talk about every day with their clients. They're busy, designing income plans, talking about growth. So when it comes to introducing this into an advisor's practice, I would say first and foremost, they have to understand why it's critical to their practice and really believe in that. It's going to impact a large portion of their book if they've got, folks that are over 45. It's something that can help them retain their customers. So understanding how it's going to impact their clients is important, and understanding that can be a retention tool. And then I could do an entire segment on referrals, because this is true peace of mind. It's something that keeps our clients up at night. But the number one obstacle is just not front of mind, or they're not comfortable talking about it.
So Virginia, how do you work with advisors? I think for their benefit, I know you not reluctancy, and thank you for that. It's more just about, it's kind of more of a sidebar type thing. Can you talk about specifically how do you work with advisors?
Absolutely. How I work with advisors is I typically will set up an appointment and talk to them about their practice and get a good feel for, what does their practice look like and how they work with their customers. Everybody works a little differently. Do they meet twice a year? Do they meet once a quarter? Do they do webinars? What works for them? And then teach them how to put this in their process. That's step number one. The minute they add extended healthcare planning into their process, they're one step ahead of the next person, and they're going to be differentiating each other themselves. The next thing I do is set up another appointment to look for potential clients. Who's going to work? We do an age sort. We make sure they have a minimum amount of disposable income because rule number one, they have to be able to afford this. And then we talk about setting up another appointment to make sure I can train them on how to have the conversation.
So it sounds like to me that you become like part of their practice, like almost like a sub-advisor. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes. So depending on the advisor group, some advisors have me handle all of it. They were like, you just talk to my clients. I've heard you. I think you're wonderful. Please take care of our clients. Other advisors want me to join them on a meeting with their clients. So I'll sit down with them and their clients. We'll do a meeting on either on Zoom or in person, and we'll discuss how this fits into their plan. Or some advisors say, just teach me everything you know. Let me role play. Help me find my script. Right. It's got to be authentic. How do I have the conversation? And then I'll talk to them about, what obstacles are out there and how do you overcome them? I'll teach them how to have the right conversations. And then I customize all the plans for their clients, depending on down to the level of zip code, what the cost of care is, what their hot buttons are. Do they need lifetime? Are they concerned about memory care? Those kinds of details all come into it. It's not a rubber stamp. Everybody gets the same situation.
And one of the things you already mentioned earlier in our call here was around obviously alternatives. It has changed, and of course now when you're talking about long-term care protection or planning, is a landing still with the traditional long-term care, or are we speaking into what terminology we hear in the industry with linked benefits and long-term care riders and kind of hybrid? And you're hearing kind of more of these asset-based. Can you give the audience some context about when you talk about long-term care planning, what are we particularly looking at in this arena today?
Yeah, today you're seeing all of those things. So you're seeing a lot of advisors and clients gravitate away from traditional long-term care, largely because they're having rate increases. There's less available on the market, and they're very expensive. So there's very few carriers left in the traditional space. The rate risk is really the biggest thing because a lot of advisors call me and say, what do I do? My client's had a rate increase and it's 30%, 40%. What do they do now? And oftentimes those clients are elderly and they're not able to be insured. And, what are you going to do? You have to make a decision on whether you reduce your benefits or increase your payments. That's never a great conversation. So what's replaced that is these alternatives. You've got hybrid policies that are designed for long-term care. They're going to be able to be fully customized and give you the maximum amount of long-term care, but with rate guarantees for life. They're going to be able to do different funding options. So you could do lifetime funding, you could do 10 years, 5 years, you can customize whatever works for the client. You can add inflation riders, 3% or 5%. You can change the length of time. If somebody wants 8 years of care, we can do that. If they want lifetime, an unlimited pool, we can do that. If they want 4 years, we can do that. So you're finding a lot of the solutions in the hybrid space are really designed to customize and maximize what the clients are looking for. There are also annuities out there with long-term care riders for someone who's got a large gain inside of an annuity and they're not going to spend it. It's not a bad option for a lot of folks. And then there's life insurance policies that have language and a rider built in that you could spend your death benefit if you had to on long-term care. Those are not designed to maximize long-term care because they won't have the inflation rider and you can't change and say, I want 6 years of care. But it's something that if you're doing wealth transfer planning, and you said, hey, let's add the long-term care rider in, we can do that. The nice thing is a lot of these policies have streamlined their underwriting, especially in the hybrid or asset-based care, where you're not having to do full medicals. You're getting an answer within 2 weeks from the carrier. And you're able to do this largely with a link and an interview online. So they've become quite accessible for clients, and they're able to do this. So
that's excellent. That's really good insight and intel there. So Virginia, I just as the advisors are listening here to this podcast, some may be saying, well, how do I get started with you? What would be the steps that they would need to do to How do they get started working with you? Or you partner
Yeah,
with them?
how you get started working with me is simply jump on my calendar. That's the easiest thing to do. Or send me an email and we can set up a time. And then we can discuss, what your practice looks like and how do you want to incorporate me and how you work with your clients. Some of the questions I get right out of the gate are, which are the right clients and what's the right age? There isn't really the right age. It's if they have enough wealth to be able to do it and they're healthy enough to access it. Anybody over 45 through 80, I would say, let's take a look and see if we can take some of the burden off the portfolio and the family. You'll look like a rock star and you'll give your clients peace of mind. And I'm glad to sit down and help you.
That's terrific. Virginia, listen, thank you for being with us this afternoon. I know that we'll have continuous conversation as we talk about long-term care, its planning throughout 2024, and certainly looking forward to have you back on another edition of NLA. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.